Hello friends, fellow bears, and now fellow kitties. To the channel, this is Nahilo here with you, bringing you the long awaited Feral Druid guide. And in a similar format to the Guardian Druid guide, we're going to be talking about stats, and then talents, and then playstyle, especially the differences between single target and AoE. And then at the end, talking about Azeroth, trinkets, and weapons, just because all those topics are pretty quickly and easily covered. And I really just want to focus this one, again, like the bear guide, on the playstyle. I just want to keep this focused on playing the spec, learning the spec, and getting used to what can sometimes be a meticulous rotation, but in the end is very rewarding and very fun. I wouldn't keep playing it if I didn't enjoy it, and I thoroughly enjoy it, especially surprising people like, oh look, it's a feral doing damage. It's like, yeah, dude, imagine a class in the game doing damage, dude, like, because I took the time to learn how to play it. Like, anyway, positivity, positive vibes. Real quick before we hop into this though, same disclaimer as the last time. I am not saying that this is the end all be all of guides. This is how I have come to learn how to play the spec. These are the results of me comparing and looking at my logs and other people's logs, just playing it. As I've said to a lot of you, the best thing that you can do for yourself is just put yourself in time in the content and time in whatever spec you're trying to learn too. That's the best way to do it. There is no substitute for that. Anyways, on to stats. You generally want to stay with the rule of crit and then mastery and then haste or verse. Two notes about haste and verse. Having a little bit of extra haste on your gear is fine for M+. You generally want to avoid it for any kind of raid or single target environment. And then adding more verse onto your gear as a DPS or a healer for really higher, harder content is just fine. I played around with adding a bunch of verse onto my cat set when we were progging on Mythic Jaina, and I mean, it was fine. As long as you're playing well, you're not really gonna lose any damage off of that, and you're also gonna be taking less and healing for a bit more with your regrowths. It's not really required if you're outplaying and just following the rules of some of the mechanics and just avoiding unnecessary damage. But in general, you want to stay with crit and then mastery and then haste or verse. And moving on to talents, starting off with Sabertooth. I pretty much always stay with this. It's really great for boss damage and raid, and especially on tyrannical weeks, and it's still helpful on trash. You don't want to sacrifice too much of one for the other. So for single target or AoE, you really want to try to find a healthy balance of both, especially in cat, because you can do it. There's a middle ground to be found to keep your damage balanced on AoE and single target, and Sabertooth is the place to start with that. Moving on to Wild Charge, great for mobility. I'll occasionally use Renewal, especially in raid or for some kind of bursting keys, things like that. And then on to Balance Affinity, definitely a necessity in M+. I'd say so for raid too, but that really just depends on what the mechanics of the fight are. If it really is heavy raid damage, you probably want to go with the Resto Affinity talent. Not really spending a lot of time outside of cat form healing, but for the passive heal, it is good, and having a Swiftman here and there is nice. But in general, you want to stay with Balance Affinity for the extra range. It's really great. And then moving on to Typhoon, of course, a necessity for M+. You could consider a talent like Mighty Bash for a dungeon like King's Rest, possibly, just depending on what the dungeon is. But in general, you want to stay with Typhoon, especially on weeks like Necrotic or Bolstering, where if there comes a point where the tank needs to kite or just needs help moving things or whatever it may be, Typhoon is great, and it's only a 30-second cooldown. And moving on to the level 75 row, Soul of the Forest is the bread and butter of Feral right now. Savage Roar does not pull ahead in raid enough, and Incarnation just is not good enough. Again, like with Bear, they need to do something else with this. So for now, Soul of the Forest makes your finishing moves deal 5% more damage, and you get energy back on all the finishing moves that you do, which means when you bite, you pretty much get all that energy back, and also adds into, once you get used to this, helping to keep your rotation smooth and fluid. And onto the level 90 row. This is the one row where you can kind of loosely change between the two talents depending on what kind of content you're doing. For Mythic Plus, I pretty much always stay with Primal Wrath. It's amazing. You should always be casting it with the Blood Talons. Gets rip on everything, is really good, especially with high crit and mastery. It's going to be doing a lot of damage, but for single target, or maybe even a dungeon like King's Rest where there's not too many large pulls, if you know your tank's going to be going heavy in there, just stay with Wrath. But in general, Brutal Slash is okay for King's Rest. Definitely for raid. I was using it on our Mythic Jaina kill, and really shines when you have more than one target up. And then on to the last row, Blood Talons. This is a talent that I pretty much use all the time. Again, Moment of Clarity, I've seen some people use it in keys. I haven't played with it too much yet. Some people like it. Has a chance to give you an extra clear casting proc and increases the amount of static energy that you have. I really prefer Blood Talons. The extra damage that you get off of that is fantastic for your bites and your rakes and your primal wraths. And always having a regrowth rolling on myself is really nice too. I'm always pumping out some kind of healing on myself. It's really nice. I like it. And has proven to be the most amount of damage so far. And now onto the real juicy stuff, the playstyle. Starting off with single target. So how you're always going to want to open on one target is pre-pot if you're choosing to do so. Berserk because it's on the GCD. Tiger's Fury, open with your rake, pop whatever trinkets you have, drop your rip no matter how many combo points you have. Because with Berserk up and a full energy bar, you will be able to refresh that 1 point rip before that falls off. Do not be concerned. You just throw up a rip with however many comp points you get on the opener from only the rake, and then just go into your normal rotation for single target, aiming for bites buffed by your Blood Talons and refreshing your rake with your Blood Talons, otherwise using the other charge on a shred. One quick note for single target, while you have the brutal slash talent, ideally you don't want to use clear casting procs on slash itself because it does cost less rage. I believe it only costs 25 energy, and shred, thrash, and swipe all cost 40. So you generally just want to use your clear casting procs on spells that cost more. As you can see here, I do have my Mythic Plus gear on, so I am keeping thrash up on one target. In raid, I do not use any wild flesh rending traits. I have 3 Tiger's Fury, 2 Treacherous Covenant, and the Berserk trait right now, which increases your rake damage and gives you a chance to proc Berserk for 5 or 6 seconds. That's only for raid though. For keys, I use 3 wild flesh rendings just because of how awesome it is. It makes swipe hit even that much harder, which is really juicy for big AoE pulls and makes thrash worth having up. For single target, it almost feels like it's not worth having up, and that only feels that way because of having played with it in raid, but then seeing how hard the shreds hit with thrash up from having 3 flesh rending, it's pretty gnarly, like over 30k easy. So we said the opener, so the rotation after you get the opener is just to get to 4 or 5 points, use your regrowth to proc your Blood Talons. If you don't need to refresh your rake, just use it on a shred or a bite if you're at the 5, and then the shred right after. The thing with rake, after you get it up on the opener, you really only want to try to refresh it with Tiger's Fury up. You will occasionally have to do it outside of that because you obviously don't just want to sit there without a rake on the target. But I have waited 1 to 2 seconds if Tiger's Fury is coming up to refresh my rake because of that, and I'll be sitting at 4 combo points to use the Tiger's Fury, use the regrowth to get the Blood Talons, refresh my rake, and then bite. Blood Talons last for 30 seconds, so you've got plenty of time to use whatever 2 abilities you need. You've got all the time in the world, but it is still good to track it. The weak aura package that I have for Feral right now is called Afenar, A-F-E-N-A-R, Druid. You can find it. I do have it in my weak aura collection, which is in the description below the video, but that weak aura package by itself, with some tweaking here and there, I did adjust some things that I would have rather seen in other spots, but after I did that, it was really nice. I will re-upload the Afenar Druid package under another name, probably related to YouTube, just to have the original whole package to do with as you will, or if you want to download it as I have it here. Anyways, right back to it. So going into the AoE rotation, as we pretty much covered the single target, you're going to open up the same way. If you're going to use Berserk on the pool, use it before you open. The idea behind that is just because you don't want to waste the GCD while you have your Tiger's Fury up. The idea is to use your Berserk, Tiger's Fury as soon as you are about to open, and then you never really waste any time. Yes, you still use the time off it from the GCD off of Berserk itself, but you're going to lose that regardless, so don't even think about that. Use it before you open up. It's just a more efficient way of using the cooldown itself if you're going to use it going into a pool. Anyways, AoE is pretty straightforward. You open up with your rake on a priority target, and then thrash to make sure all of your swipes are going to be buffed by your 3 wild flesh rending traits, or however many you have, and just swipe till you hit the 5 points. If you have a gushing laceration trait, we'll talk more about the traits later, but be prepared for the extra combo points that could come with that, especially on the AoE. Your only goal for AoE is to maintain thrash on all of your targets, swipe, throw rakes on priority targets here and there as it's convenient. Use your blood talents for your primal wrath and the swipe after, or to throw a rake up on a priority target again. And then going back to another staple of this, once you get down to 4 targets, you want to use a rotation of primal wrath and then a bite and then a primal wrath with the usage of your combo points, because once you get down to 4 targets, primal wrath is not enough damage on AoE to make up for the damage that you're losing not biting, and the duration of rip that you get off of a 5-point primal wrath will last long enough for you to use 1 wrath, bite on whatever target you choose, and then get another primal wrath out after, before the previous rip that you had falls off. If you're staying active and paying attention, you can do this with ease. Now the other thing with the rotation on AoE, for an instance like any kind of raid encounter that has a bunch of ads, how you spend those 5 combo points, it's pretty much up to you. If you have a priority target like a mini boss or some shit like that that just has a lot of health, or it's a fortified mob that might have more health than the other mobs in the pack that you're fighting, you can either choose to use your blood talons and your 5 points on throwing a rip up on a target, throwing a bite on a target if it's near dead, if it's not going to live long enough, spread rakes however you can. AoE while using Brutal Slash, I will tell you this, it's awkward. If you're not in raid, it's awkward. For me, at least. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I feel super spurgy when I'm trying to do that. It's okay in King's Rest because there aren't too many larger pulls, and like in the gauntlet with the 4 trash packs after the first boss, the only really large pack in there where it would make any kind of a difference is the one with the king and all the skellies around him, and it's easy enough to just get a rip rolling on that dude, keep your thrash on everything, and then just keep using a Brutal Slash, because even if you take the Brutal Slash talent going into a King's Rest key, or even maybe a temple if you so choose, it really just is a personal preference on that, but in general Primal Wrath is going to be the more convenient, better choice for Mythic Plus. So with all that being said, let's have a look at the damage breakdown for some of these fights. You can see, yeah, Ferocious Bite, man, it's huge. Rake ticking up to 24k throughout that. You just have a look at all these, mousing through these, seeing the bite damage, the swipe damage, the rip damage off of Primal Wrath, seeing the Primal Wrath damage itself. These are the things that I look at to kind of gauge what's working, what's not working, what's doing well. And quickly on to Azeroth, trinkets, and weapons. For Azeroth, for Mythic Plus, you really want to aim for 3 wild flesh-rending traits. 1 to 2 Tiger's Fury is fine. You really want 1 at least to get the extended duration on it. One of the Gushing Lacerations traits, which makes your rip deal more damage and has a chance to grant you an extra combo point every time rip ticks, which is quite often when you're on a large trash pool. This trait is very nice. The Blightborn Infusion and Swirling Sands traits, both crit procs. I like them both. I would use whatever one that I could. Their uptime isn't fantastic, but when it procs, it's huge. The main reason I'm using Blightborn now is not only because it's a decent trait, but because on the inside row of that, on the 3rd row, I have an Unstable Flames trait as well, so I'm just constantly getting a lot of crit off of that piece, and it has a Wild Flesh-Rending trait as well, which ties in nicely to that 3rd ring. Unstable Flames is really good, Overwhelming Power is really good. The Blood Siphon, the Mastery and Leech trait is really good, and the rest of them just kind of as you see fit. I would probably go with like Heed My Call or Get Ripper over maybe Earthlink, but just aim for those 3 others, and the rest of it won't matter too much. You just really want to aim for crit, mastery, haste, and then worst case just straight agi for attack power. Showing our single target traits here right now, by the way, for helm, shoulders, and chest. And then on the very inside row, Resounding Protection is a fantastic trait for raid and for keys. The movement speed is also really good, which also compounds with Pharaoh moves really fast. I usually sit around 150% move speed depending on having one piece on here or there or not, which is pretty insane. So you generally don't need the move speed, but it is a decent choice if you have something like a switch hitter to choose between. That trait is actually trash, so Probably want to take the move speed. The Beaver's trait also isn't terrible, as it does give them a minor food buff. It's 60 of whatever stat they have. Hopefully they'll buff that up come next tier, but we'll see. I would, again, probably take him passive over that. Resounding and a passive are probably the two best choices that you could take there. As a DPS, you're probably not going to be pulling threat too much unless your tank is just actually terrible. Then you probably don't need to worry about having a gem hide. And yeah, that's it for Azeroth traits. For trinkets, real quick, the Lurker's Insidious Gift from Unat in Crucible of Storms is really good. It's a fat mastery proc for 30 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown, but you do take a dot that ticks harder and harder as the proc is up. So just be careful when using this. Use a defensive here and there if you have to. Ideally, don't use a defensive for this, but if you really don't want to cancel it and you can comfortably use a survival instincts here, that's fine. It's only a 2-minute recharge. That's another instance of where I say it's cooldown, use it. If you never use it, like if you're always holding on to it, what's the point of even having it? Use that shit, man. Use your cooldowns. Anyways, back to it. Trinkets after that. I really like Harlan's. I really like Spyglass. Plumage is okay. Kimbo's from Battle of Dazara lore with the leech, and it does a little bit of extra damage. This is really only a single target trinket. I wouldn't use this in keys. And then the Alchemy Stone is always a decent choice. Verse with a huge agi proc and makes your health stones heal for more. Always good, especially with the new health pots that we're getting in 8.2 that are going to be healing for more. And then lastly, weapons. The Royal Purifier's Spade from King's Rest. It's a crit mastery polearm. Really good. Ideal stats on that piece. The Horn-Ridged Crusher from Grong and BOD is a crit and haste polearm. Not bad at all, especially for keys. Halberd of the Unwary Guard and Tol Tagore is crit and verse. Not a bad choice. And Trident I wouldn't use, but it's good for PvP. It's really, really good for PvP. And then anything besides these is just item level. And I think that's all I have for now. I tried to keep this video as short as I could, but with some things with Pharaoh, there's just a lot to talk about. I like really going in depth with a lot of the talk about the traits and the trinkets and the abilities and the talents themselves and the synergy that can be found between some items that can feel really good. Same for the talents is what I've found here. What I really like to play with, so I hope this really proves to be helpful for you. I'm gonna just close this out now before I continue to rant, but thank you all very much for your time. I'm here for your questions, comments, concerns. Please hit me up down below or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/NahilloTheBear. I'm always open for questions. Come hang out, chat, see some high keys, see some low keys. I'm playing quite a few alts at the moment, getting ready for 8.2 as well, and playing Classic here and there, which is fun. I need to get back on there and level to 40, but it's a beta and it's not gonna last. So I'm trying to bring myself to do it. I will, because I do want to get some more videos out, and I do want to see how it's going to feel getting to the end of that first talent tree and getting leader of the pack and having Heart of the Wild and all of this. So thank you again. Links for supporting the channel are down below. We are getting more and more patrons. We have a lot of more and more subs on Twitch. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you for the support. I am trying my hardest over here to provide solid, knowledgeable content that is also objective to not just following the meta. I play what I enjoy, and you should too. Don't let somebody else tell you what you should or shouldn't do. If you really want to see if you like something, try it out. And worst case, you don't like it, you move on, you try something else. The good thing about WoW, there's a lot of choices. I just like surprising people with this one here and there. So with all that being said, take it easy, be nice, work together, don't yell, get better, and I'll see y'all very soon.